also now being joined live by Jessica. Thank you so much. She's joining us live from the Capitol Hill. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we were just discussing how this inauguration speech would perhaps be different from Trump's first one. What is your expectation from this?
Well, rest assured, we here at VOA are trying very, very hard to get copies of the script. The only advanced copy that has been released, or excerpts that have been released, has gone to the Wall Street Journal, and that's where we've seen that there will be this theme of a revolution of common sense, which really speaks more to the cultural zeitgeist of the reason that Trump got elected, especially countering wokeism, this idea that you can't confront people or speak civilly, you just cancel them. These are things and some of the government policies that he's going to get rid of fall under that umbrella. But the other thing that has to do, of course, with common sense is the reason that more Americans crossed over to vote for Donald Trump. Inflation, gas prices, egg prices. We still have egg prices going up, I think $5 or $6 a dozen, which is expensive for the United States. And so these are the things that we expect to hear him talk about, very much in contrast to the dark and dismal picture he painted 8 years ago from the Capitol Hill when he made his inauguration speech in 2017. So we do think that we're going to hear a much more hopeful, progressive vision. And I don't mean progressive in the sense of some of the policies so much as just a moving forward. And in this case, that's really a reversal of many of the Biden policies. That's what we're expecting to see him begin to sign the moment he is sworn into office.
Right. Now, Jessica, another thing to watch out for here. We heard Joe Biden in his farewell speech warn of a tech industrial complex or oligarchy. We saw a few minutes ago Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos at the Capitol Rotunda as well. We know Elon Musk is going to have a greater role in Trump 2.0. How do you assess Biden's comments?
Well, I think that, he's in a dark place. I think we've seen reporting and indications that he is certainly still believes that he could have beat Donald Trump in this election, that he's still justifying his decision to run despite the obvious difficulties he's having with his speech and with his movement. And he is talking about control of the oligarchy. But, the counter narrative to that would be who has been in control of Washington for the last 4 years. It's been the elite, the political establishment. These are the kinds of messages that Trump ran on and won. So the American public has voted, and they have said, we want someone who operates, in their estimation, in this world of a revolution of common sense, in a world of not being elite, right? Like the working class and the middle class of the United States really stood up, and they are people that have voted for Donald Trump and support Donald Trump and his message. So these oligarchs, it's also hearkening back, I believe, to the Ukrainian oligarchs, which really chaps the rear end of some of those folks in the Trump orbit, because that's exactly what led to his first impeachment trial. I would point out, though, that, these are the same tech titans who fell all in line for Biden 4 years ago. So while it's important to note and be cautious of their involvement in government and their access to government, these are innovators. Think about Starlink. Think about SpaceX. Think about Blue Origins. These are innovators, and this is what this country needs to move forward. And I would point out to the Indian audience watching us, that is the companies that will have the H-1B visas that will bring you to the United States to be able to work here and lend your innovation to the economy of the United States. So this is not an economic promise that Trump can make without the help of the tech sector, and bringing them into an economy and into a vision for the U.S. economy to grow and prosper. We're no longer in an age where you can just manufacture your way back to prosperity. You have to have technology at the ready.
All right, Jessica, I also wanted to discuss, international relations have been under the scanner as well. How these evolve under Trump administration, that is something that will be a key area of attention and focus as well. We know Chinese Vice President is in Washington to attend the inauguration. But there is anxiety among the neighbors as well, with China, Mexico, Canada, even in Europe. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that this is a normal response to the kinds of rhetoric that have come out of Donald Trump's mouth. I mean, talking about taking over islands like Greenland or taking over countries like Canada. These are not the words of someone with whom they are used to dealing, certainly in the past. And so there will be a reshuffling of alliances, of proximity. It may well be like the first 4 years of the Trump presidency, where so many things are established based on a personal relationship, like the personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump. Or it also may be that as so much is orienting U.S. foreign policy, is this getting away from these longstanding wars, particularly now in the Middle East as well as in Europe, and moving towards an overarching goal and aim of countering China. That would put India back in the orbit, certainly of Donald Trump, as it has been in the orbit of Joe Biden, building on the first 4 years of the Trump administration. And it would also mean that the nature of the trade relationships with the United States have to continue to change so that Chinese goods cannot come in through places like Mexico, where they're building car factories, that they can't come in through cheap goods and flood the market in Europe, a key trading partner for the United States. And so I think what you'll see is an orienting around that concept, and that will affect alliances. And certainly this is a transactional president. This is a guy who wants to make a deal. So everything has to be put through that lens. This is not about a moral high ground or who's right and who's wrong. It's about, can you get to an agreement that helps the United States? That's the lens that these allies need to now look through.
Absolutely, Jessica. Also, to let our viewers know that these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Capitol Rotunda. A few minutes ago, we saw the Clintons arrive, the Bushes arrived as well. And here you can see everyone eagerly waiting for President-elect Donald Trump. Just a few minutes ago, we also saw President Joe Biden arrive at the Capitol Rotunda. In a few minutes from now, Trump will be taking the oath of office. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take oath of office first and will be followed by President-elect Donald Trump, who, as we've been discussing, is expected to issue a slew of executive orders that will set the tone for 4 years of his Make America Great Again agenda.
Relationship had some ups and downs, but it settled down, and we established a very, very good via media by the end of it all. You would recall that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump had that extraordinary Howdy Modi event in Houston, which had 50,000 Indian Americans, listening to the two presidents at that rally. Subsequently, President Trump came to India for Namaste Trump, and in Ahmedabad, he addressed 100,000 people. So those were high points. There's a good connect between the leadership, but also I think on every front, whether it's the geopolitical point of view, the fact that the Trump administration revived the Quad, they had instituted the 2+2 dialogue of defense and foreign ministers. They were strong on counterterrorism. They were supportive during Pulwama in listing of entities in the Security Council. So from every perspective, I think there was good cooperation. We also, I think, did very well on the economic side, where our bilateral trade increased. We started sourcing oil and gas from the United States for the first time. And I think we had some very good two-way investment flows during that period of time. So from that perspective, Trump 1.0 was something that we were able to watch closely. It will be very different in Trump 2.0.
Absolutely, Ambassador. Also, Trump has made several campaign promises, something I was discussing with Susan as well. It's now time to act. Do you think he will be able to deliver on what he has promised?
Trump as a candidate and Trump as a presumptive president, he is not hitting out at his rivals. He is not making comments that are derisive as far as his protagonists are concerned. So perhaps there will be greater sagacity. If there is a legacy issue, there are historic issues that are in play, and that might come into focus. But essentially, I think Trump 2.0 will certainly have some of the elements that you would expect in terms of a certain level of unpredictability, a certain level of, even spontaneity in terms of decisions. But that's the style that you have to deal with and you have to contend with. And you should be prepared for surprises when you least expect it. But at the same time, you should, in every challenge, there is a silver lining. And we have to understand that when it comes to issues such as trade and tariffs, we are not the first in his sight of vision.
All right, and when it comes to ties with China, that is another big question. How do you assess Trump reportedly inviting Xi Jinping for the inauguration, and how do you see ties between the two evolving?
So Trump's approach is never unidimensional, it's multidimensional. So on the one hand, he has a strong view that China has to be contained, that China's rise in the manner that is rising is detrimental to the interests of the United States. At the same time, he believes that the dumping of cheaper Chinese goods in the U.S. market is preventing manufacturing from coming up in the U.S. You are right in saying that key members of his team have strong views when it comes to containing China, whether it is the incoming Secretary of State Marco Rubio or whether it's his National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, or whether it is the incoming Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth. All of them have views on China, and they are hawkish views. But at the same time, Trump has said that he's spoken to Xi Jinping, that he's a friend, that he can work out an arrangement with him. So there is both the threat and bluster as well as the accommodation. So there will be a two-pronged approach.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for your insights on that. And these are the live visuals that we're getting from Washington, D.C., Trump's convoy en route Capitol Hill. Just a few minutes from now, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States of America. This will be Trump's second term in office. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take the oath of office first, followed by the President-elect Donald Trump, who is expected to issue a slew of executive orders. The next 24 hours of Trump's presidency and Trump's time in office are going to be crucial to watch out for. This will be starting with the opening invocation, with the vice presidential oath, and then the presidential oath and address, as I mentioned. These are the live visuals that we're getting from Washington, D.C., Trump's convoy en route Capitol Hill. And as Donald Trump prepares to take the presidential oath for a second term, ecstatic crowds gathered in freezing cold, hoping to witness history unfold. Beyond the celebrations, the world's eyes are now turning to Trump's bold promise, ending the Russia-Ukraine war and securing his claim to a Nobel Peace Prize. Take a look.
Frigid winds whip through Washington streets. The U.S. Capitol buzzes with anticipation of Donald Trump's imminent return to power. Despite temperatures plunging below freezing, supporters gather in growing numbers. Their excitement is palpable. Donald Trump claims credit for facilitating a Gaza ceasefire for hostages deal, a months-long negotiation that finally came to fruition under his envoy's watch. This success sets the stage for the real work ahead, ending the bloody war in Ukraine.
I will end the war in Ukraine, I will stop the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent World War III from happening, and you have no idea how close we are.
Trump's timeline for peace in Ukraine has evolved from an ambitious 24-hour to 100 days resolution to a more pragmatic 6-month framework. This shift reflects a growing understanding of the conflict's complexity and the delicate balance required for lasting peace. The situation on the ground is dire for Kiev. Ukrainian forces face mounting losses as Russian troops advance, claiming key territories. Russian missiles and drones have devastated Ukrainian cities, leaving Kiev in a desperate fight for survival. US support remains critical, but speculation grows that Trump may pressure Ukraine into territorial concessions to expedite a deal. Ukrainian soldiers on the front line accept the grim reality that without the United States backing, it would be near to impossible to sustain the bloody war.
It's clear that without American aid, it will be very difficult for us. In fact, it has always been delayed. It was not provided in a timely manner. Some of the military operations that we carried out directly during the 2023 counteroffensive, many offensive brigades did not receive the equipment that they were supposed to receive, but received it after the counteroffensive. I'm saying this is all geopolitics.
Trump has an opportunity to go down in history as a savior of a big nation because we are literally being exterminated.
As Russian precision-guided weapons continue to strike Ukrainian cities with devastating effect, Trump's peace initiative gains urgency. His approach draws parallels to previous diplomatic efforts, including the 2020 Abraham Accords and his North Korean negotiations, for which he claims Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is open to negotiations with Trump. Putin has outlined non-negotiable demands, including Kiev's abandonment of NATO ambitions. With both sides entrenched, Trump's task will require a delicate balance of diplomacy, pressure and strategic compromise. The challenge before Trump carries historic weight, achieving a durable peace that preserves Ukrainian sovereignty while ending the bloodshed could indeed merit Nobel recognition. However, a fragile settlement that enables Russian dominance would mark a significant setback for American diplomacy and Trump's legacy. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
All right, and in the bitter Washington cold, America stands at the precipice of a seismic political shift. Donald Trump, the man who rewrote political rules in his first term, prepares to reclaim the presidency with promises that send shockwaves through global capitals. The world watches with bated breath as Trump readies to unleash his particular brand of disruption across domestic and international spheres. Trump's return to power comes with bold pledges. He takes credit for the recent Israel-Hamas ceasefire and the release of hostages. But his most ambitious promise is ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Initially vowing to end it in 24 hours, Trump now suggests a realistic timeline of a few months. How will Trump achieve peace? Well, he hasn't revealed a concrete plan yet. Immigration remains a top priority. Trump plans a hardline crackdown on 11 million undocumented migrants. He considers declaring a state of emergency on the southern border to redirect defense resources for enforcement. And then the Chinese vice president is in Washington to attend the inauguration. But Beijing is buckling up. Trump threatens a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, accusing Beijing of failing to control fentanyl production. America's next-door neighbors too are bracing for the impact, while Mexico and Canada confront a staggering 25% levy on their exports. Trump's reasoning? Their alleged failure to stem the flow of drugs and illegal migrants into American territory. Trump has vowed to restructure government agencies and slash bureaucracy, setting up the Department of Government Efficiency with billionaire Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy at the helm. International relations are unlikely to stabilize under Trump's leadership. His focus on America First policies and territorial threats to nations like Greenland signal an era of intensified nationalism. Europe is also keenly watching the incoming president. The French Prime Minister has cautioned that France and Europe risk being dominated, crushed and marginalized if they do nothing to counter the policies put forth by Donald Trump. Pope Francis urged Trump to lead a society with no room for hatred and to promote peace and reconciliation. Pope says that Trump's plans to impose mass deportations of immigrants would be a disgrace. At 78, Trump will replace Biden as the oldest U.S. president and joins Grover Cleveland as the second leader to reclaim the presidency after losing it. His return marks a historic, contentious chapter in American politics. All right, and these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Capitol Rotunda right now. We were seeing earlier how Trump was en route to the Capitol Hill. He is here now. This is the Capitol Rotunda. This is where Trump will be delivering his inauguration address as well. For more on this, we're now being joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who is in New York. Susan, we can already see everyone's gathered in the Capitol Rotunda. I know a lot of the supporters were really disappointed that the venue had to be shifted indoors. Susan, I'm sure you've been talking to people through the course of the day as well and in the lead up to the ceremony. What are we hoping for?
Well, this is a very important day because of the way that the president-elect and the incoming president got elected. He really literally, figuratively won a landslide. So he does have a mission, and the promises that he made, I think the American public are going to be looking forward to and seeing, how much of it can get done as soon as possible. Because making campaign promises, on the one hand, is one thing, but then going into office and trying to execute those, of course, is another. Nonetheless, we are expected to hear from the incoming President Donald Trump. He's going to talk about the revolution of common sense, in his own words, from what we have seen. And he wants to talk about unity. He wants to talk about strength. But he also wants to talk about the way forward for the country that's going to be very different from what we saw in the last 4 years with the Biden presidency. Here in New York, because of the cold weather, there aren't many people outside. There aren't anyone out and about to that extent, and those that wanted to went to Washington, D.C. to be part of this historic event. But nonetheless, New Yorkers are also, on the one hand, looking forward to his border policies because New York really has been a hub for these illegal migrants and migrant crime. But then there are those that are concerned that they might go too far and, there may be immigrants that will be impacted where they're not really, part of that sort of deportation process, and it might just cause, more harm than good. So this is where we are right now. We'll have to wait and see how much of this can be executed on the part of the president, but we do know that he's expected to sign those executive orders. And, we talked about the border issue, we talked about energy. I did also want to say that he promised to sort of restore TikTok. He can't do that with an executive order. He might say that, he's going to be working on it. He will have to sort of sign that into law. So the TikTok ban and the executive order, where, these two have sort of been aligned with one another, he can't do anything about that. That is going to wait. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not he's going to use TikTok as a soft power tool with Xi Jinping moving forward. So those are some things to look out for as well.
Right, Susan, absolutely. Now, Trump has pledged to end many of outgoing President Joe Biden's initiatives, especially the renewable energy initiative, including those passed by Congress in the landmark Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Now, that will be something to watch out for as well. What has been the response for that?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's energy policy, drill, baby, drill, that was a huge campaign promise on the part of the incoming president, and that was something that a lot of those battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, these are oil and gas workers that were very concerned about Joe Biden's energy policy. A lot of them were working on this pipeline called the Keystone Pipeline. Actually, President Biden signed an executive order to halt the Keystone Pipeline. It was a transfer of energy pipeline, and a lot of people lost their jobs because of that. So, that was one of the points that was important for these voters in those states because it would create the economy, because of the jobs, and also because, energy independence is such an important issue for many Americans. So, the energy policy, he's expected to talk about a state of emergency when it comes to the energy issue as well.
Right, Susan, of course, we're getting live visuals from the Capitol Rotunda. Just a few minutes ago, we also saw Elon Musk there. That's something I wanted to discuss with you as well. Susan, how are people reacting to the role that Elon Musk will be playing in the incoming administration? We know, of course, that he will be playing quite a significant role this time around. How is that being received?
Well, on two fronts. On the one hand, there are those that are concerned about Elon Musk's role in government, but there's something that everyone can agree on, and that's overspending in government. And he's expected to take over DOGE, that sort of non-governmental organization, possibly with Rebecca Ramaswamy, and they want to cut, spending in government. That is the bipartisan issue. Everyone knows that there's extra spending, and these spending needs to be halted. There's an issue about how involved Elon Musk is going to be in, the White House and American politics. On the one hand, once again, people are very happy because, he's almost a genius, really, in many ways, and people want that. But on the other hand, there are those that are concerned that, it's just someone like Elon Musk and his ideals, where they just don't align with a lot of the ideals of the Democratic Party. So a mixed bag, but nonetheless, it'll be President Trump's prerogative to see, how far Elon Musk can really be involved in the White House and how much of it is going to be only regarding that organization, DOGE.
Right. Now, we're getting these live visuals. The Clintons have arrived in the Capitol Rotunda as well. And now, Susan, just coming back to the point that you were making earlier, and this is something, in fact, that we've discussed a few minutes ago. We also saw Jeff Bezos there, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark Zuckerberg is there as well. That being said, we heard in Biden's farewell speech how he mentioned the tech industrial complex. He warned of that as well. Now, Susan, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that was very bizarre, considering the fact that, on the one hand, they weren't the tech industrial complex when Meta was collaborating with the Biden administration to suppress stories on COVID, on his son Hunter Biden laptop story. These are words of Mark Zuckerberg. They said that the Biden administration was very involved, notably in silencing Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump's accounts were all closed not only on Meta platforms, but on what was X now, what was Twitter before. So they were recognized, but it's interesting now that there's been this change of heart on the part of Zuckerberg, and Twitter has been sold to Elon Musk. All of a sudden, they're the bad guys, and they become this tech industrial complex. It's very bizarre because he was sort of aligning it with a military-industrial complex that many are critical about. Many thought that was taking it a step too far. And also because he talks about oligarchy as well in his farewell speech. And again, he was alluding to perhaps Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. And a few days before that, he gave someone like George Soros, who has invested so much in American politics, the Medal of Honor. So, once again, there was sort of this discrepancy between his words and what his own administration had done. And I think that was pretty clear for many Americans.
All right, Susan. Well, of course, people are pouring into the Capitol Rotunda. We will be tracking all the live developments on that. Thank you so much for joining us for now with the latest on this. We'll continue to monitor this closely. All right, and these are the live visuals that we're getting from the Capitol Rotunda, where Donald Trump is all set to be sworn in a few minutes from now. We've been getting you the live visuals. A few minutes ago, we saw the Clintons arrive as well. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg are in attendance. Now, what happens in the first 24 hours of Trump in office, that is something that remains to be seen. Now, he will be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States of America, only the second to be elected to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Now, Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take oath of office in the Capitol Rotunda. Now, within hours of taking office, Trump is expected to sign dozens of presidential executive actions as well, including one to formally. Now, there is a lot that he's pledged. In fact, he's going to be ending many of outgoing President Joe Biden's renewable energy initiatives. Now, it really remains to be seen how much of it is logistically possible. He has made some really bold campaign promises. The time is to act. Whether he will be able to deliver on all of them, that is, of course, something that remains to be seen as well. Digital currencies will be looking, of course, for day one actions from Trump as well. If I can just get you a brief overview of the schedule, it will start with the opening invocation by Senator Amy Klobuchar. Will call the ceremony to order. Timothy Cardinal Dolan and revered Franklin Graham will deliver the invocation. And opera singer Christopher Macchio will perform O America. This will be followed by Vice Presidential oath. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh will administer the oath of office to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Carrie Underwood, accompanied by Armed Forces Chorus and the U.S. Naval Academy Glee Club, will perform America the Beautiful. These are as per reports. That will then be followed by the presidential oath and, of course, the much-anticipated address. Chief Justice John Roberts will administer the presidential oath of office to Donald Trump. The Glee Club will also present the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Following the swearing-in, Trump will deliver his inaugural address as the 47th President of the United States. This will then be followed by a benediction that will be given by a group of religious leaders, including Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, Imam Husham Al-Husseini, and Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. This event will then conclude with the national anthem performed by Christopher Macchio. As you can see, these are the live visuals that we're getting right now from the Capitol Rotunda. Trump is expected to sign about 200 executive orders. That has been a topic of much discussion. It remains to be seen what these will be. It remains to be seen whether he will be announcing these live or not. The first 24 hours are going to be very crucial and will set the tone for his Make America Great agenda for the next 4 years. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will take the oath of office first, followed by President-elect Donald Trump. Now, ahead of Trump's swearing in fact, Pope Francis had offered prayers, and in a message to Trump ahead of the inauguration, the Pope said that he hopes that the United States will build a society, and I'm quoting here, where there is no room for hatred, discrimination, or exclusion. Now, from what we know from Trump's past speeches, he's vowed to repeal swathes of Biden-era legislation within hours of taking office. He's expected to sign over 200 executive orders within the first few days in office. The most important being immigration. Trump has put illegal immigration front and center of his agenda. He's expected to unleash a dramatic shift in that regard as well. So America is really in for a seismic political shift. His other decisions, from what we do know as per reports from now, could involve removing regulations on oil drilling, pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and axing the $7,500 tax credit that made electric vehicles more affordable. All right, now we have Susan Teherani on the phone line with us. Susan, as I mentioned here, his other decisions could involve removing regulations on oil drilling, pulling out of the climate agreement. What can you tell us about that, Susan?
So Donald Trump has been clear about how countries themselves that are involved in these kind of agreements aren't paying their fair share. And so, as with NATO during the first Trump administration, where he encouraged NATO member states to raise their spending, it's probably going to be the same here as well. Whether or not he'll completely pull out is yet to be seen, but he's very adamant in other countries, aside from the United States, paying their fair share when it comes to these multilateral organizations. But nonetheless, it's clear that the Trump administration 2.0 is going to be a lot more isolationist than what we saw with the Biden administration, and being part of these different organizations, whether they're related to the World Bank or the UN or whatnot. And, Donald Trump is someone that, if his first term is any indication, prefers to deal with countries one-on-one. prefers to deal with world leaders one-on-one, and he's not really a fan of these multilateral settings. So that's not surprising. And then when it comes to the issue of climate change, he has been pretty vocal about how he wants the United States to return to fossil fuel, and that the world can't afford that right now. And while he hasn't really talked about global warming to that extent, we know that his policies are really going to, they're not going to center around climate.
Right. Of course, from what we do know, as per the schedule, it will be Senator Amy Klobuchar who will be calling on the ceremony to order. In fact, earlier she said the inaugural luncheon is a time when members from both sides of the aisle come together in recognition of our democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. And I'm looking forward to continuing this time-honored tradition today. Of course, it remains to be seen how that pans out. What are we really expecting from the inauguration address, and how do you think this time will be different from Trump's first term in office?
So we have heard about what he's expected to talk about. It's going to be very different, of course, than his first term. He's a lot more comfortable now assuming this office of presidency. It's not going to be very confrontational. He wants to talk about peace and strength, of course. He wants to talk about unity. He really says that he wants to bring the country together. And what was an interesting quote that he is going to talk about is the revolution of common sense. So basically bringing common sense back to the forefront. We are also expected to, see this event being indoor. So it's going to be a lot more muted and subdued than if it was outdoor with so many people on the lawn watching. And the guest list has, of course, been cut down significantly. So it's going to be a lot smaller, but nonetheless, it's supposed to be something that is non-partisan. It's going to be a transfer peaceful of power. But it'll be also interesting that it may be the first time that we're going to see foreign leaders, like Javier Milei, also attend this ceremony. Nonetheless, we talked about those tech entrepreneurs and leaders. Of course, they'll be sitting alongside congressmen and senators, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Sam Altman of OpenAI, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, and of course Elon Musk is going to be there as well. So it's going to be a very interesting crowd. There will be celebrities as well, Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, John Doe. But also, just seeing these Democrats and Republicans come together will be interesting in a smaller setting.
Right, Susan. Now, of course, another thing that I want to discuss with you was international relations under Trump 2.0. We know the Chinese vice president is in Washington to attend the inauguration as well. But we do know that Beijing is buckling up. It is preparing for proposed 10% tariff on Chinese imports, which Trump will be imposing, accusing Beijing of failing to control fentanyl production. That being said, how do you see the ties between the two evolving?
A lot of America's China policy has been consistent, even during the Biden administration. Although many criticized Biden for being too soft on China, notably when it came to COVID and trying to find the root causes of that virus with Xi Jinping. But Biden also kept a lot of the tariffs that Trump had imposed during his first administration. But it'll be interesting to see how Trump wants to work with China. While we talked about the tariffs that you just mentioned, but also he's been having conversations with Xi Jinping, not only regarding TikTok, but also, the issues in the Indo-Pacific. And something that is going to be very interesting to watch is the issue of Taiwan, where the Trump administration is going to stand, because we know that China has ambitions to move on Taiwan. To what extent will the Trump administration 2.0 be willing to, get involved in something like that? In terms of trade, it's going to be, again, very interesting to see how the United States wants to maneuver these tariffs, be hard on China, but on the other hand, also not increase prices for Americans here at home as well. I mean, the Chinese market, of course, is vast here in the United States. And also, it'll be interesting to see whether or not diplomatically how these two governments are going to be
Right.
able to interact with one another.